Hello, humans! If you've been watching this channel for a while, you'd know that I'm a major fan of Disney. I have collectible items, I do Disney movie marathons with my wife, I have several Disney albums on my phone, and my wife and I even went on a Disney cruise for our honeymoon and spent our last day at Magic Kingdom. However, in recent years, Disney's projects have been ranging from lackluster at best to absolute abominations at worst, with a few exceptions. Part of that reason is because their projects feel like they were made by a paint-by-numbers kid, and checking out boxes of what they think people want to see, but are way off. One of these boxes is Disney's Adorkable heroines, and I already have a video where I rewrote these characters to fit better with their stories while also making them more unique. However, there is another lazy character type that Disney has been using lately that I don't think gets talked about enough: the jerk heroes. These guys are arrogant, self-centered, selfish, rude, quick-thinking, reckless, snarky, inconsiderate, and are usually the foils to the female characters, who usually tends to be adorkable. And yet, simultaneously, they're supposed to have a secret heart of gold that gets brought up by the female character. So the female characters are going to be criticized for having the same personality, and rightfully so, then so should the male characters. In this video, I'll be looking at these characters individually and discussing what I mean when I say Disney has a jerk hero problem, and why I am personally flippin' sick and tired of it. Before we begin, keep in mind that this is just my opinion, and if you disagree, that's fine. Just don't be about it. Besides, this being an overused character isn't exactly debatable. Now, without any further delay, let's dive right on in. First of all, I should say that unlike the Adorkable heroines, which really started being a thing in the 2010s, jerk heroes have been around long before. There's Basil from The Great Mouse Detective, Peter Pan from Peter Pan, Beast from Beauty and the Beast, Kuzco from The Emperor's New Groove, Kenai from Brother Bear, just to name a few. And there are characters that have similar traits without being outright jerks, like Dodger from Oliver and Company, or Tramp from Lady and the Tramp. But many of them had traits that differentiated them. Beast is a hothead, Peter Pan is an eternal child, Basil is unbelievably clever, Kuzco is hilarious, and Kenai was a reckless and immature little brother that had to learn how to be a big brother. Probably because there's different ways of being a jerk, so you have more wiggle room with these characters. And this character type has been seen outside of Disney with characters like Dimitri from Anastasia, Shrek from the Shrek franchise, Kale from Kind AE, and Sinbad from Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas. Plus, when these characters came out, they weren't all back to back to make these characters feel really repetitive like nowadays with Disney, where they could honestly, for the most part, be interchangeable with each other. Obviously, there were the occasional exceptions, like Ralph from Wreck-It Ralph, Hero from Big Hero 6, and both Searcher and Ethan from Strange World. However, a majority of the heroes from the revival era have just been the same brand of jerk hero that secretly has a heart of gold despite being selfish and having the ego the size of Jupiter. Now, while there had been characters in the past that fit this character mold, I'm gonna credit Naveen for this persisting character type, even though I'm pretty sure the popularity of Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, was also a major factor as well. Naveen is playful, selfish, immature, arrogant, easygoing, and a ladies' man. In other words, your typical jerk hero, but in a way that's presented as charming. I personally saw him as if Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast was made into a leading man, but also given flaws for him to overcome. He does mock Tiana openly, though that's something that would get worse with later heroes. He and Tiana fit into the trope of the hardworking and determined woman that ends up with the womanizing slacker that just needed to find the right woman. But in all honesty, I feel like in the case of Naveen, the character works. Yes, he started the trend, and while this character type isn't one of my favorites, he's not truly insufferable and can be charming. Part of that is because, unlike a lot of the other heroes from this era, he doesn't feel focus grouped. It feels like they went with this personality because it was the right one for the story. Could his development have been done better? Yes, though I blame that more on the fact that Tiana was changed into a frog, which honestly affected the flow of the story. Not to mention the story just having details that aren't needed, though I still adore the movie. But overall, Naveen is a good character, at least to me. Not great, but likable enough and feels like the right personality to give this character. However, while Naveen may have been the blueprint, Flynn Rider / Eugene Fitzherbert became the standard. He has a lot of the same traits of Naveen, but with an added meta humor as a way to make the men and boys not feel quote-unquote embarrassed about seeing a princess movie. He has to constantly look annoyed at Rapunzel's antics, mock others, and refuse to sing when he's a character in a musical because we have to question why people are singing in a flippin' musical. In something like Enchanted, it works because of how Giselle is from the fairy tale world and has been thrown into the real world, so of course Robert would find that to be weird. However, it makes the tone of Tangled feel like a DreamWorks movie with an identity crisis. Flynn honestly causes a lot of the tonal problems with his meta humor, which isn't helped by Zachary Levi's delivery at times coming off as too performative. Like Flynn knows that he's a character in a movie and is hamming it up for the audience, which got even worse in the otherwise excellent TV series, as well as him being humbled never actually happening.
You should know that this is the strangest thing I've ever done! Sorry, It's just cheekbones like these. They just don't come around twice in a generation, people. They don't.
I know a lot of people love Flynn, and while I don't hate him, I still can't stand him. From a writing standpoint, his development is decent, but the execution makes him feel more like an annoying comic relief character, and he feels focus grouped. Following the popularity of Flynn Rider, they gave us another jerk hero with Kristoff from Frozen. I've already gone into why I can't stand this character in my video about if Frozen holds up, so I won't get too into that. But to summarize, he's just a poor man's version of Flynn Rider, to the point where they even reused one of Flynn Rider's rejected concept designs. A jerk for no reason, a tacked on backstory about how he was an orphan but they don't do anything with it to explain why he is the way that he is, and constantly berates on it because we had to make the boys and men not feel quote-unquote embarrassed about watching a princess movie. Honestly, that's the only purpose Kristoff serves, apart from the Sisters Before Misters lesson. You could have had Olaf lead Anna to Elsa's palace, which is what they end up doing anyway, and it's telling that the Prince Charming type character is made into the twist villain, and that the one who's supposed to be relationship goals is a guy with poor hygiene that constantly belittles Anna. Very similar to how in the Snow White remake, they had Snow White's love interest go from a charming and sweet, even if flat and underdeveloped character, that is devoted to her and sings her sweeping ballads into an absolute to her and dismisses her trauma being turned into a servant by her abusive stepmother as quote-unquote princess problems, because Neptune forbid a woman be with someone who treats her well. I'm not gonna get into how terrible Jonathan is, because this video is just about Disney's animated heroes, but you can check out my review of the Snow White movie, as well as this mermazing video by Calaxon Cares Too Much. In 2016, we not only got two adorkable heroines, they also came with their own jerk heroes, with Nick Wilde from Zootopia and Maui from Moana. Just like Flynn, Nick is also a shady character with a tragic backstory. He's constantly snarking with jabs at Judy and making things difficult for her just for funsies. Granted, when he first met Judy, he could tell that she had some fox prejudice with her microaggressions, so it's more understandable. Although I can't help but compare Nick and Judy to Danny and Sawyer from Cats Don't Dance, where prejudice also plays a role, but Danny is a hopeless optimist without being adorkable, and Sawyer is a jaded cynic without being a jerk. To me, it shows that this movie feels more focus group than anything else, which makes sense when you learn that this movie was originally darker and they had Nick as the protagonist, but everything changed 8 months before it was released, which I feel like you can clearly tell in the final product. And while I actually like Nick, as his character feels more fleshed out than the other jerk heroes, he feels held back with a story because it's clear that this was meant to be his story instead of Judy's, but it was changed due to how we can't have dark stories anymore, with the exception of Raya and the Last Dragon. But the more I learn about what Zootopia could have been, the less I like the final product, which is incredibly average. And this affects its characters, making them feel focus grouped, including Nick. As for our other 2016 jerk hero, Maui took the meta humor of Flynn and Kristoff but dialed it up to 1,000.
If you wear a dress and you have an animal sidekick, you're a princess.
He's constantly making those jokes to appeal to the men and boys, so he has to make fun of Moana and the past Disney movies, as well as make terrible pop culture references that don't make sense for that kind of film that this is trying to be. Plus, much like Zachary Levi as Flynn Rider, I found The Rock's performance to be trying too hard. Although I'd argue it's worse here since it's just The Rock playing the same character he always plays. I mean, Awkwafina as Sisu is a flawed choice, but even she knew when to be serious. Whereas this guy is always making jokes in inappropriate moments that make the film hard to watch. And in all honesty, Maui is a bigger jerk than his predecessors. He was willing to leave Moana stranded on an island that has nothing but rocks, threw her overboard several times because comedy, assumed she was dead like it was nothing, and didn't check on her when they were in the realm of monsters, leaves the mission and there's no buildup of him returning, so it comes out of nowhere when he does, and causes this whole mess and is basically just given a slap on the wrist. They try to give him a backstory with his parents abandoning him, but it's not enough to justify how horrible he is. I would have said he's the worst of all the jerk heroes if it weren't for Jaeger Clade from Strange World. Yeah, if you forgot about this guy and his movie, it's for good reason because the film is terrible but also forgettable. Jaeger Clade takes Maui's already overly inflated ego and dials it up to 1,000,000. I mean, this guy abandoned his crew and his 15-year-old son in the middle of the frozen nowhere because they didn't follow his orders or just wanted to do something different. Then 25 years later, after being reunited with his son, all he can do is just constantly berate and belittle him. Yeah, no emotional depth there. I guess since Searcher is the uptight nag with dorky moments and Ethan is the Adorkable character, we need him just to be a jerk to someone. And while the other characters are frustrating in how unoriginal they are, save for Naveen who started this trend, you can at least see why people would like them, even Maui. However, Jaeger is just a horrible character with no likable qualities to speak of. Now, I could be biased here because I've never really been a big fan of the jerk hero character, at least the ones with massive egos that act like they're the best thing since sliced bread, although I'd argue that all opinions are inherently biased. After all, I love characters like Beast and Shrek who are definitely jerks, but they don't have the type of egos that the jerk heroes from the revival era have. Plus, Kenai from Brother Bear is one of my favorite Disney heroes, and he's kind of a jerk as well. Not to mention my favorite Ken character from the Barbie movies is Aiden from The Magic of Pegasus, who is very snarky and has traits of the jerk hero, but isn't unlikable or belittling. But I feel like the development of this character has to be equal to just how bad the character has been, and most of these characters fall flat, or at the very least make them really entertaining like Cusco or Jasper from Klaus. Sadly, that's not the case with Disney's new wave of jerk heroes. Plus, apart from a few exceptions, Disney has a refusal to explore different personality types. Are traits like being humble and sweet really such unappealing qualities for men? Is being a decent person that doesn't act terribly really such a boring idea? Is a man having an I Once song so wrong, especially when it's worked with characters like Aladdin from Aladdin, Quasimodo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Hercules from Hercules? Another shared trait these characters seem to have is that they're snarky, and I do love snarky characters, being that I'm so sassy and sarcastic that I could rival the Golden Girls. However, a lot of the snark from these characters feels rooted in misogyny, given that these characters were created to appeal to boys and men being dragged to these quote-unquote girly movies, and it was done to keep them from feeling quote-unquote embarrassed. I don't want to get too into this, but my friend Better with Bob actually gets into this in his video about Disney's quirky girl problem, so I highly recommend you check that out. For me, I tend to prefer snarky characters like Megara from Hercules, Anastasia from Anastasia, Dorothy Spornak, and Sophia Petrillo from The Golden Girls, where they are all unapologetically themselves, unfiltered, and most of the time giving these comments to people who are pretty much asking for it, or as just playful banter, rather than just being horrible for the sake of being horrible. Not to mention, those characters don't feel rooted in spite like the jerk heroes do, since they were created to mock the female-led stories. So while the jerk heroes of the revival era aren't quite as interchangeable as Disney's Adorkable heroines, it's still really repetitive and terribly overdone at this point. While they could also be meant as a subversion of the Prince Charming archetype, Disney has already done that before, and these days, it's rare to get a Prince Charming type character or even just a decent guy as a hero these days. And you can have a Prince Charming type character that's more fleshed out in personality. Just look at Eric from The Little Mermaid, Derek from The Swan Princess, and even Prince Charming in Cinderella 3: A Twist in Time. Instead of just making slightly different variations of the same character, even when other personality types would work just as well, I'm begging to see other personality types like they did with the past Disney eras, especially from the Renaissance era where the characters didn't feel interchangeable with one another and had personalities that fit with the stories. I mean, think about it. Would the stories be the same if Quasimodo and Shang switched personalities? Hercules and Aladdin? Eric and Beast? Tarzan and Phoebus? Simba and John Smith? Let's even compare two jerk heroes from the experimental era. Would the stories be the same if Kenai and Cusco switched personalities? I don't think so. Now, what about Flynn and Kristoff? The differences aren't quite as obvious, are they? The jerk hero can work, but it shouldn't be the only character type Disney is using for their male leads, and they should still be characters that are likable, and so far the only likable ones are Naveen and to a lesser extent Nick. So can we please make complaining about these jerk heroes the next viral trend and hope that Disney finally gets the message and returns to their roots? Though Disney being Disney, I doubt they listen. And those are my thoughts on Disney's jerk hero problem. What do you guys think? Do you agree with what I said, or do you like Disney's jerk heroes? Let me know in the comments. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to help my channel take off so I can do this as a full-time job, which I would really appreciate. You can also check out my other social media accounts in the links below. I'm the Wicked Merman from Under the Sea.